Quick warning, discretion is advised for story 2 because it gets quite gruesome and also there is blood involved. So if you don't like blood, just skip past it. And also there is a crazy end, and please watch story 3 because, well, it can happen to anyone. And so with this relatability, I think it will definitely give you the goosebumps. So with all that being said, let's begin. On a Sunday night in 1935, a man by the name of Victor was strolling down on Broadway on New York's Upper West Side. He was walking through this area because he was there to hand over a suitcase, which pretty quickly he would arrive at his destination. It was a dark back street which wasn't too long, but at the end of the street was another man who just happened to be dressed in a suit. And as this man in the suit was looking at Victor coming towards him, he saw that he had a scar on his left cheekbone and he had dark burning eyes. He had long sideburns and perfectly manicured nails. So once Victor was in arm's distance, he would hand over the suitcase. The man who was about to receive the suitcase from Victor would look behind Victor to see everything was clear, and once everything was clear, he would take the suitcase and then he would open up the suitcase. Now, as this man was opening the suitcase, he was expecting to see a lot of money from various Federal Reserves, aka banks, or he was hoping for some secret blueprints that Victor used to gain his massive fortune. But when he opened the suitcase up, all he saw was expensive clothing. So of course, as he's looking at this expensive clothing, he would look up at Victor and would tell him, "What was this?" But really, before he could even say anything, Victor would pull his finger up and would open up his trench coat that he was wearing and would put his hand inside of one of the inside pockets of his trench coat, and then he would pull out a wallet, and inside this wallet was a key. And so once he pulled the key out, he would give it to the man. The man of course would reach out and take the key, and then he would begin to look at it and then ask Victor, "What's this key for?" But Victor wouldn't say anything. After this exchange, the man would quickly head back and quickly find out that this key leads him to the Times Square subway station. And in this station there were a section of lockers, and one of them belonged to the key that was given to him by Victor. So once he found the right locker, he would eventually put the key in the locker, open the locker up, and inside the locker the Secret Service agent would find $51,000, or in today's money is about 1.1 million, which by the way were counterfeit, and it was the end of Victor. Born in Australia in 1890, Victor Lustig was somewhat of an anomaly, but to put it quite simply, he was just really smart. From a young age, he would learn many different languages, and by the time he was an adult, he would be fluent in many different languages. Throughout growing up, Victor adored money and just making money. His parents, of course, when they seen that, wouldn't mind at all and would instead indulge in his love for money. But little did they know, things would kind of spiral out of control for Victor. Victor was also known to be quite the charming kid and also quite persuasive and just generally quite believable. And since he was like this, he would get away with many things. But it was during the year 1925 where the now older Victor had set sights on one of the biggest heists in history. Now the older Victor would arrive in Paris during the year 1925. And well, if you know anything about Paris, you know that the Eiffel Tower is situated there. And as Victor began to roam around Paris and explore the city, he would stumble upon the newspaper of that day and saw a very popular story about the Eiffel Tower rusting and how the Eiffel Tower, to keep it in shape, was high costs and high maintenance, and because of this was causing the city to lose a lot of money. And during this time, this news was really big because again, the Eiffel Tower is like Paris's main attraction, and it's just kind of overall the symbol of Paris. So with this massive story and also the fact that Victor had heard rumbling of mixed people that disagreed on the building of the Eiffel Tower, Victor had on the spot would come up with a plan that would change his life forever. So with this new idea, Victor would find all the largest scrap metal dealers in Paris. Once he found all of them, he would send out letters of him claiming to be the deputy director of the Minister of Public Works, which was someone that handles government buildings and other important stuff. And after sending these letters out, he would get a room at the Hotel de Crillon, one of the city's most upscale hotels. And in this room, he would conduct meetings with many scrap dealers, telling them that there's been a decision made to take bids for the rights to demolish the Eiffel Tower and take the possession of 7,000 tons of scrap metal. He would even go as far as to rent a limousine and give tours of the tour, all while making these meetings unknown and discreet to anyone else. So all this combined would make the scrap dealers that were interested in the metal of the Eiffel Tower very excited, and so excited to the point where they would send Victor the money without really thinking about it. And so essentially Victor had sold the rights to the Eiffel Tower without even owning it. The crazy part was the first time that he did it, he would leave the country and would go back to Austria where he was from, and mainly because he was scared that he would get caught. But for some reason nothing about his crimes had gone public. So with that giving some confidence, he would go on to sell other things that weren't his, aka scamming people, but would again try his luck to sell the Eiffel Tower. But this is where he would ultimately get caught by the Secret Service agent. Altogether he would make about $100,000 by selling the Eiffel Tower, which in today's money is about 7.6 million. The date is July 4th, 1884. Captain Tom Dudley and his crew of 4 would all commence on this massive journey from Southampton, which was in southern England, all the way to Sydney, Australia. Now, the boat that these 4 were going to use was this 52-foot inshore boat, and really they shouldn't be using this boat to go on such a long distance trip, because 16 years before, when the boat was actually made, it wasn't really made for these long ocean voyages. But Captain Dudley kind of overlooked this fact, because the reason why they were going to Sydney, Australia in the first place was because someone had bought the boat and specifically chose Captain Dudley to deliver it to them. So really Dudley had no choice. Either sail the boat, which still was a really good boat, or say no and lose money and lose some credibility as well. And also, yes, reliability as well. So of course Dudley knew what he was going to be choosing. The crew that Dudley was taking consisted of Dudley himself, Edwin Steffens, Edmund Brooks, and Richard Parker. Now Parker was the youngest out of all of them, being just 17 years old. Growing up for him was tough. He had always loved the sea and would always wanted to go out to the sea, but unfortunately had no experience of the sea. And also he was an orphan, so many opportunities that other people would get to go out to sea wasn't really available to him until he started working with Captain Dudley. And on this trip that he was going to be the cabin boy, and even though it wasn't really a fancy job or even a fancy title, it kind of did just suck, Parker didn't care. He just wanted to get out to the ocean. So eventually, after getting the crew together and getting all the preparations ready, the crew would set sail from the Southampton docks. Now the journey would go smooth all the way till the night of the 5th of July. Oh wait, the name of the boat was called the Mingonet. That was the boat that the crew was sailing on. Sorry for forgetting to mention that. So the crew were in the middle of the ocean, about 1,600 miles off the coast of Cape Town, which was next to South Africa. The men were inside the cabin drinking and just having a laugh. And they would do that all the way till the time was getting really late, and well, they would all go to sleep. And it was just about a couple of hours into their sleep that one of the men would wake up. And as he woke up, he would instantly feel this something off vibe about the boat. So he would get up, he would leave the cabin and walk onto the main section of the boat. And that's where his premonitions kind of came true, because he saw the ship's bulwark had been ripped away by a rogue wave. This in turn would cause the ship to start flooding rapidly. So as the ship is quickly gaining water inside of it, the man would quickly wake up the rest of the crew, and well, within 5 minutes of 4 men would quickly scramble onto their very poorly constructed lifeboat. And when you see within them 5 minutes, the boat would completely sink to the bottom of the ocean. The crew would somehow manage to bring a couple of navigational instruments and 2 cans of turnips, and well, try to picture a small and not well built lifeboat in the middle of the vast ocean aimlessly wandering. And on the first night it was rough, as you can expect. They had to face sharks and would fight them with their oars, and having no fresh water to drink for the entire day, not to mention the blazing heat that would rain down on them during the daytime. But the next couple of days it would go the same, but eventually they would break into the first can of turnips and would split it evenly among the 4 of them. Now with this can and the other can would last the 4 men about 2 days before ultimately they were out of food. But to their surprise, Captain Dudley would actually catch a sea turtle, and the meat from the sea turtle would help keep the crew alive for another couple of days. Now moving on to about a week into that horrible tragedy, the men had now fully run out of drinkable water that they had initially caught during when it rained, and now had been forced to drink their own urine. And despite knowing what it will do to you, Parker and Stevens would begin to drink the seawater, and well, as you can guess, both men would fall ill. And by the 16th of July, all the men had become delirious and of course were suffering from extreme hunger. And during this time, the crew would have conversations about killing and eating one of the crew members. Nothing serious would unfold until like about a week later, where now the crew was really going to die from starvation. So naturally the conversations about cannibalism would become more and more serious. And also during this time, Richard Parker, the youngest, would fall into a coma. And since he was in a coma, Captain Dudley would suggest that they sacrifice Parker so the rest of them could stay alive. But these dying men would argue against their Captain Dudley about this plan because there was an unspoken rule called the custom of the sea that was basically about keeping your crew members alive at all cost. So even though technically he was in a coma, Parker was still alive, and therefore this rule would apply. Dudley, who can't really do anything in this situation because it was 2 against 1, would accept the fact that they can't sacrifice Parker, so he would sit and wait. But those men who had initially stood up for Parker and said that we can't sacrifice him would slowly but surely begin to doubt their choice, and eventually when the hunger got to an all-time high, they would actually agree with Dudley now and say yes, we have to sacrifice our beloved cabin boy. So the next part is a bit disturbing, so heads up. The men would decide that not only was eating the flesh good enough, but drinking the blood of Parker would be good enough in order to stay alive. And it gets worse, the men had become so desperate to eat Parker that they didn't want Parker to die naturally, because that would take way too long. They wanted to murder the boy and eat him right away. Now picture this, 3 men on a lifeboat looking at Parker, whose head was kind of sticking out from the boat. And again, he was unconscious because he was in a coma. And they're all looking at the unconscious Parker, telling themselves that they can't wait any longer. So on the morning of July 25th, the 3 men would gather around Parker, who is now in the middle of the little boat. Once they all gathered around Parker, they would say a prayer. And after the prayer was done, Stephen would hold Parker by his feet. And once everything was ready, Dudley would push his penknife into Parker's jugular vein, killing him instantly. And for the next few days, the men would stay alive by eating Parker and drinking Parker's blood. And it's described by one of the men, when they first killed Parker, the men would begin to eat Parker's flesh like they were a pack of hungry wolves. And they would begin to fight who should get the most of it. And you can just imagine if someone hadn't had food in a couple of weeks, to having food, the picture's just horrifying. The men had lost all self-control. And of course, naturally, this would keep the men alive for another 4 days. But after those 4 days, when the horrible sacrifice was made, they would be spotted and saved by a German sailboat. The men once saved would actually get arrested. Stevens and Dudley would be found guilty for murder and would be sentenced to death, but would get that reduced to only have to spend 6 months in jail. Brooks would act as a witness, hence why they knew what happened and why the other 2 got punished. Now this story is quite well known, not because of the gruesome fact or the act, mainly because 46 years prior, before the men had ever went to sea, there was an author by the name of Edgar Allan Poe, and well, he would go on to write a poem that was extremely similar to what these men had gone through. And remember, when he made this, some of the men weren't even born. And if you're interested in what that poem is and what it's called the Narrative of Arthur, Gordon of Nantucket. It's 2009 and Joe Cummings would go through something that no one should ever go through. I mean, it's something straight out of a horror movie. So the year again is 2009 and Joe is coming back home from his apartment in Manhattan. Manhattan, if you don't know, is in New York. And well, it's quite on the upper side of New York City. And many people that had money would live in Manhattan. But Joe wasn't that type of wealthy. But either way, the area was known to be quite safe. Now, Joe had come back home after going shopping and getting some groceries for he and his girlfriend. So of course, once he got back home, he would be greeted by his partner, and well, the 2 would begin to put the shopping away. And then once the shopping was done, they would chill out for the rest of the day before the night came, and ultimately they went to bed. The next morning, Joe would wake up and well, everything was normal until he stepped out of his bedroom, and once he did, he could instantly smell the horrible smell of urine. Now of course he was confused and quite disgusted by the smell, so he would begin to start looking around his apartment on where this smell was coming from, which the smell would eventually lead him to the kitchen. And so he would begin to search the kitchen, and so pretty quickly he would find himself at the sink, and the sink was covered in dishes that hadn't been cleaned, and so you couldn't really see the bottom of the sink. But Joe knew that whatever this smell was coming from the sink. He couldn't see it, but he knew it was coming from there. And that was mainly because the strength of this smell had gotten stronger when going near the sink. So with one hand holding his nose and the other hand beginning to move plates slowly, unloading the dishes onto the side of the sink. And just before he removed about the 5th or 4th plate, which kind of revealed the majority of the sink at this point, what this smell was began to get more clear, and once he figured out what this smell was, he would begin to hurl. Because there was urine, like actual urine, on his sink. And basically someone or something had decided to take a leak on his sink. Now furious, he would march over to his bedroom and would wake his girlfriend up and would show her on what the hell's just happened. And she would too be disgusted and also be scared on what thing could have done this. But she would quickly tell Joe that it was probably a rogue animal that had gotten inside or something else. Joe, who was still angry, would kind of calm down and kind of agree with his partner, and the two would begin to search the apartment for this creature that had done this. But after searching for what felt like hours, they couldn't find anything, so eventually the two gave up, and also changed their theory on where this liquid could have came from, which the theory was the liquid must have came from the tap. Somehow, they don't know how, but somehow. And to them, that was the only logical explanation. And as they were discussing this theory on the couch, Joe would get up and would head over to a secret cabinet filled with sweets. And so once he got there, he would open up the cabinet and would kind of just stand there not saying anything. And as his partner was talking and saw that she wasn't getting any responses from him, she would kind of turn around and look at him and ask him, "Hey, what's up? Why are you just staring and ignoring me?" And Joe would turn around, look at his partner, and would accuse her of stealing the sweets, which of course she was quickly taken aback because she knew that she had stolen nothing. Joe wasn't buying any excuses from his partner. He would say there was much more food in the cabinet before just a couple of days ago, but now it's not, and I haven't even had any of it. So certainly, since you're the only one in the apartment with me, it must be you. His partner again insisting that it wasn't her, but Joe once again wasn't buying any of it. And this would kind of lead them into a massive argument, which ended up them not speaking to each other all the way until the very next day. Joe once again would wake up early this time and would basically get out and rush towards a sink, where thankfully his sink was okay, there wasn't any urine on it. But when he opened his cabinet again, he saw that there was even more food missing. So now Joe is mad and would wake up his partner once again, telling her that, "Why did you take even more of my food?" And of course his partner would jolt awake after getting accused of stealing more food. And again, unfortunately, another massive argument would start. But after arguing for the full day and not really getting anywhere and just saying the same points again and again, the two would come to an agreement that tonight there'll be cameras set up around the apartment so we can really see on where the food was going. And in Joe's brain, he's expecting his girlfriend not to get up tonight, which meant that in the morning the food's gonna be there. So that night the two would go to bed after Joe set up all the cameras in the apartment. And everything would go normal until in the middle of the night, Joe would wake up because he needed to go to the toilet. So he got up, opened his bedroom door, and swore that he could hear something from his kitchen. So as he slowly walked towards his kitchen, and as his kitchen got into view, he saw that there was nothing there. So chalking this up to his imagination, he would go to the toilet, do his business, and then would go back to bed. The next morning, the two would wake up practically the same time, and quickly, without wasting even a second, would run over to the cameras and check the security footage. And this is what they saw. That's right, a woman who Joe had no idea of had been living in Joe's upper cupboard all this time. She was the one eating his food, taking a leak in his sink, and just using the house when Joe and his partner were asleep or out the house. You can see on the video of the woman climb down from the cupboard that she was in, and then with the stool underneath the table she was on, she would make her way all the way down onto the ground. And then once she's on the floor, she would head straight over to the sink where she would proceed to take a pee in it. And after she was done her business, she would open up the fridge, grab some drinks and grab some snacks. And after sitting down on the sofa watching TV, she would then return to the fridge before once again hiding. That's when the night before Joe needed the toilet. And little did he know there was a crazy woman living above him, watching him as he went into the bathroom and back into his bedroom. After getting arrested, she would tell the police that she had been living in that crawl space for about 2 weeks. Joe would later tell the news and the police that he had no idea that she was here and how she got here, but the only way that he could think of her getting inside was through the window, as he was living on the top floor and there is also a fire escape. The police would make a theory that she was going to rob the two at first, but after finding out this crawl space, she would decide that instead of robbing them, she was going to live there. And the worst part about this whole thing, that supposedly this wasn't the first time that the police had dealt with a case like this. So that'll be it for today's stories. Comment below your thoughts on these stories. But all that being said, if true crime stories intrigues or interests, then I would highly suggest you subscribe to my YouTube channel, as that's all I do, and I upload once a week. But with all that being said, I thank you for watching, and yeah, goodbye. So the year again. The next morning, Joe would wake up as he went into the bathroom.